quorum here. Dr. Randalls is absent for the moment. Do we have any public comment this morning? Nope, seeing none. First item on the list is the action item for the best practices money.
Yes, good morning.
Morning, Julie.
We have before you the resolution that's required to begin to receive our best practices incentive money from the state. If you'll remember, that's the $52 per pupil. And with the recently passed resolution for the board to declare itself policyholder on its insurance policies, we are now bringing the full resolution before you, and within the document it identifies which of the 8 criteria that we meet as a system.
Is there any questions?
Nope.
Is there a motion to approve the best practices?
So moved.
Support? All right, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. All right, donations.
Donations, we have one donation to bring to you today. It is from the Douglas and Maria DeVos Foundation. The donation is in the amount of $70,000 to help support the marketing of the Grand Rapids Public Schools, along with the billboards and the radio sponsorships we've heard. So,
Any questions about that?
No question. I just like it. Point of whatever it is. You're the Roberts Rules guy. I'd like this taken off consent so we can briefly mention it at the public meeting. I think it bears underscoring, and there ought to be further board discussion about, at the end of the day, we've got to have a marketing plan. I really, really appreciate that they gave us the money for this, so no one can criticize us for spending our money wisely on marketing. But I think that the next step we've got to get to as a system is to the point where we're systematically saying, okay, if we're going to halt our student hemorrhage, we're going to have to figure out how to market ourselves well, and we're going to have to start spending actual money of our own on it. I'm glad that they've jump-started it, but I think we're going to have to produce, and John's nodding his head enthusiastically. At the end of the day, you know, billboards are great. I mean, the first thing I think we got to do is change general public perception, but the second thing we got to do is really work on marketing, and I'm sure, John, you've been spending half your life, here he comes to, you going to comment on this? All right, but you know,
Sorry.
at this
Couldn't
point,
resist.
I think that I'd almost say that we can't do too much on marketing at this point, so.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And if you look at one of the goals of this plan is at minimum to recruit additional 200 new students, and that's 1.4 million. So you're spending 70,000, and it's actually, that's one of the reasons I wanted to come up, is this is actually a matching grant essentially, where we've taken the money we've raised from advertising dollars from the We Are GR, and they've agreed, it's a little more than they've gone above and beyond the match. But in addition to that, we're asking some of our other community partners to further augment this with additional fundraising. So we'll likely have more donations to bring before you. But the idea is to really change our approach and be aggressive in marketing, not just what we've done kind of fits and starts because we've had limited funds. Now we've been able to maintain a marketing effort that's really continuous pretty much since October.
One other just stray thought, it would be kind of cute, but I know now from last week that MLive is now embedding videos in their articles. They're doing that so they can sell Chuck E. Cheese ads. It'd be nice if we could embed a GRPS ad in front of any board member comments that get linked to stories. I mean, if they start asking us for comments, it'd be nice if we could have a, yay, look how cool Grand Rapids schools are. Before, because presumably people reading the article care about Grand Rapids schools. That's minutia, I know. Sorry, no, not supposed to micromanage.
Any other questions?
We will.
That's why I said it would be cool, not go do that.
Is there a motion to approve the donations?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
All right, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, motion carries 3-0. Reports and updates, state retirement system.
all right, I'm going to ask Mrs. Braidway to come up, and I have for you at the table a multi-page document. With the passing of the retirement reform at the state, I just thought it would be important to just spend a few minutes here this morning to describe for you what this now means for us as a system. It's very detailed, very complex. While it's good that it will save us some money, it's a lot of work on our end, which we were just beginning to do, and so I'm going to ask Melanie to walk you through all the changes that have recently occurred.
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. On the first page of the document, it just kind of talks about what the plan was. Before the retirement reformed, we had 5 plans. There was a basic plan, a MIP fixed plan, a MIP graded plan, MIP plus, and hybrid. And based on your original hire date with Michigan Public School, you were put into one of these plans. And as you can see, they have different ranges of deductions for each employee based on your wages. And then also in July of 2010, retiree health deduction began, which they took a 3% deduction to go towards current retirees' health insurance. Those monies, however, through the enactment of the retirement reform, SB 1040, are in litigation in an escrow account. Board contributions, up until the retirement reform, there was 2 different rates. If you were in basic, MIP fix, MIP graded, or MIP plus, you had one rate, which through January 31 of this year was 25.36%. And if you were a hybrid plan, it was 24.13%. And then your pension calculation was the same for everyone. So everyone had, they took your final average compensation times 1.5%.
Can you explain the MIPSRS rate for those, Mr. LeGrand?
For the rookie.
Yeah, for the 24.46 and
Yeah.
the 23.3, what that rate represents?
That represents, like, it takes, like, what is calculated in that rate, or?
Right. I don't,
It covers both the cost of the pension and the healthcare side of the retirement plan. And so for every dollar that we spend in salaries, we have to contribute 24.46% as a district, for example.
on the pension liability.
Okay.
It's the Michigan Public Employees.
I see. So they're putting in 3%, and we're putting in 24%,
Correct.
basically?
Yep.
Okay. You said board contribution rates. You meant, okay, got it.
So the individual employee pays a percentage, so
Right. The
back
system.
before the reform, and
Right.
then we as a district have to pay this 24%.
Got it.
So at that time, or currently, your pension for everyone was calculated at the same formula. Everyone took your final average compensation times 1.5 years of service, times the years of service to get your annual straight life pension. So before the reform, that's how everyone's pension was calculated at the time of retirement.
Right.
With the SB 1040, employees then had options for how they wanted their retirement plan to look. Employees were asked to log into their My Account and make the following elections. The first deadline was October 26th of 2012, and then later changed to January 9th, 2013 at 5 p.m. You had 2 elections to make with the retirement reform. There was a pension election and then also a health election. The pension election gave 4 options. Option 1, members were, if they chose this option, they wanted to stay at that 1.5% in that pension calculation from the first page. So they opted to stay at the 1.5%, but then their contributions that they made increased. So basic members in the past contributed 0, and now they were asked if they wanted to choose option 1, they would contribute 4%. The MIP members were on that graded scale as before. If they chose option 1, they would go up to a flat 7%. They would retain that 1.5% pension calculation, and then the increase was effective at our transition date, which was the February 15th payroll check. Option 2 is similar to option 1. They would choose to increase their contribution, but only until they reach 30 years of service. Once the employee reached 30 years of service, they would then go back to their original contribution, which was listed on that first page, and then their pension factor for anything earned above 30 years of service would go to a 1.25%. So they would, in essence, have 2 separate pension calculations, and they would combine that into one. Option 3, if members chose option 3, they would continue at their current contribution rate. Their pension formula would be 1.5% up until the transition date. Any years of service earned after that would be calculated at a 1.25% in calculating their pension. And then if members chose option 4, they were choosing to end their current pension calculation would stop at the transition date, and they would go to a DC plan where they would contribute to a 401K and be vested 100% in that after 4 years of service, and then also a 457 account. So when you retire, they would only base your pension calculation up into the transition date of February 15th. Even though they may have earned years of service after that, their pension would only be calculated to the years up until that transition date if they chose option 4.
Question?
Can you share a little bit more about what type of employee would choose which option? You know, if this was an employee that was relatively close to retirement or had so many years of service, you know, most of the time you can kind of figure which category people would choose, or if you have real data, if you know how many of our employees.
I do have real data coming up here
Okay.
on what the percentage of our employees, what options they chose.
Okay.
Members who had not made an election by the deadline date, so as of January 19, 2013, at 5 o'clock, if they did not log into their My Account and make an election, they would default to option 3. So they would remain at their pension calculation factor would go to 1.25%. Employees then also had to make a retiree health election. They could choose to continue to get the health insurance through the Office of Retirement and the premium subsidy. If they elected to choose that, they would continue the 3% retiree health deduction. Then at time of retirement, they would be eligible for the premium subsidy. Employees, the second option would be to have a personal health care fund where they would contribute 2% to a 457 account. The board would match that 2%, and that would go into an employer 401K account, and that is through ING, through the Office of Retirement. At time of retirement, the employees would not have the option to choose health insurance through the Office of Retirement. They would use these funds, could be used towards health insurance costs. If members did not elect one of these, so if they did not log into their My Account, they would default to the option 1 premium subsidy. Anyone newly hired to a Michigan public school after September 4, 2012, no longer had an option to choose into the health insurance. They would automatically be put into the personal health care fund, which would enroll them in a 2% employee contribution to a 457 and employer match of a 401K. At time of retirement, they would be eligible for a health reimbursement account if they had at least 10 years of service at termination. The credit would be $2,000 for participants who are at least 60 years at termination, or $1,000 for those participants who are less than 60 years old at time of termination. Employees who first worked on or after September 4 of 2012 now are able to choose between 2 pension types. They can choose that Pension Plus, which would give them a monthly pension at time of retirement, or they could choose the defined contribution, which they would then manage themselves, would not get a monthly pension through ORS. The results for Grand Rapids Public Schools, there was 3,080 employees that came to us in a file from the Office of Retirement. The file was received on January 14th, and we needed to get that implemented into our system by February 11th to be effective on the February 15th payroll. This required at least 4 new plans for us to create, many new calculation codes created in our system, numerous updates to our current calculation codes to be rewritten in this short amount of time. Below is the percent of staff that elected each of the options. Option 1, so to remain at the 1.5%, increase your contribution, 26% chose this option. Option 2, 2% chose this option. Option 3, to remain at your current deduction level, to have your factor go to 1.25%, 55% chose this option. And option 4, 3% chose this. And there was 14% of employees who were either on leave or were part of the Pension Plus program already that did not have a pension election option, and that was 14% of staff. For the healthcare option, 91% chose the premium subsidy, which would continue their health insurance through the Office of Retirement. 9% chose the personal health care fund. So we went from 5 basic plans before the reform, and now there's about 28 different options that employees can be in. So it's a large learning curve for myself and my staff when we get calls in from employees to determine what plan they're on, is basically logging into the Office of Retirement website and telling us what plan they are now on.
Yeah, so, the first bullet has 3,080 employees on the file received from the Office of Retirement Services. Can you explain what that means? Is that for, obviously, that isn't all employees, so,
That was all active employees that had an option to make an election were on that file.
so only those who were eligible to make an option.
Right, if they were newly hired after September 4, they could not make an option, yep.
Got it, okay. And I don't know if you're sharing this with the full board, but you may want to just, define that a little bit clearer.
The next page is a list of our new employer contribution rates. So we went from the 2 that we had previously to now 9 different contribution rates. And as you see, there's many different rates listed. You also see that some of the rates are lower in red. But then you'll see also below that there are some additional DC contributions that the board needs to make if they chose those defined contribution plans. So for an example, and if an employee elected to go from the basic MIP to the defined contribution plan with the personal health care fund, the district's current contribution rate is 26.96% now for them. So with so many different rates, as you all know, budgeting is going to be a challenge for us this year as we're trying to figure out and create reports to see what everyone chose, and then we have to look at their compensation and then use one of these different rates to try and budget for them. So we're working on that currently to try and get on target with our budget.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I thought it was good that they had incentives, the state had incentives to get people, as a district, for you guys to make sure that everybody, signed up.
Right, yeah, we started at a low rate that employees had initially, before the reform, had logged in, and we worked hard to get that.
There were numerous communications that went out to employees between the
And
ORS
signs
and our
throughout the
system.
building
And
Yeah.
signs went
all
out to the
that
building, so,
Signs.
and I think we ended up we were just a hair under 80% of our staff actually logged in, so that was pretty good.
Huge, I
We're-
think, yeah.
What was it like? It was some nominal contribution they give back.
We ended up getting about we as a system, the incentive for us, we got about $9,000. So,
But I imagine it'll be a full year before you can really determine if there was any actual savings based on.
yeah. It'll be a little bit, and we've had conversations, I've been involved in conversations with the other business managers of the Kent ISD, because they're trying to tackle this same concern about how to budget for this now, and what do you do? Do you come up with some type of blended rate based on where your employees are at and what they've elected? And I know that, as Ms. Bradway has said, her and Ms. Cribbs are working through what's best for Grand Rapids Public Schools, because just due to our size, sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult to measure ourselves against the ISD counterparts. But it's good to hear what they're attempting to do. So.
And I think one other good plus in this for staff is getting them educated to log into their My Account. They've really kind of taken a little bit more ownership of their retirement, because now they know they can log in and see their years of service and see their wages and see where they're at. So it's been good.
Thank you very much for coming down and sharing with us. financial statements.
Right, we have before you, the financial statements for the month of February. We're about 56% of the way through the school year and 66% of the way through the fiscal year. Not a lot to comment on. In regards to our general fund and our special revenue fund, we're a little bit behind in our people transportation, and that's mainly in our grants fund. There's an allocation process that we use for our Loop after-school program, so we're working through that information between our office and Dean Transportation now. And then, in regards to our cash and our debt, just wanted to highlight, as requested by Ms. Lanier, that in the month of February, we successfully performed an advance refunding of the remaining 2004 bonds, which will save our taxpayers over $700,000 for the balance of that issue, which will be paid off in 2018. So that's great. We went from an interest rate ranging from 4 to 5% to a fixed rate of 1.13%. And J.P. Morgan Chase was the winning bid on that refunding, so.
Well, I can borrow money for 1.1%.
Well, yeah, and it's worth pointing out in economic terms, what that literally means is right now, we are being paid to take people's money. With 3% inflation, you know, if we could borrow $18 billion and go do something with it, it would be to our advantage. Strange world.
Any other questions about the financial statements? All right, on to purchases here.
All right, we just have two items on the purchasing agenda. The first is Clark Hill. I know we love to see this one again. With the length of negotiations, what I have done with this is I made an attempt to get us through. This covers January, February, an estimated February, an estimated March, and just a small transition amount that we think. With the hiring of Ms. Pitts for our Executive Director of Human Resources and Legal Services, she is becoming fully immersed in the system, and we're slowly transitioning, say slowly, but hopefully quickly transitioning out the use of some of our external legal firms.
So that was really my question, was it retro or was it for the future? I know we have a few contracts that we'll start negotiating relatively quickly, so I didn't know if.
We do. We're not, at this point, well, I haven't had a conversation with the superintendent, but it was our goal to not have legal sitting at the table for those other negotiation sessions, to really have Ms. Pitts there, and then if we need to make a phone call for some reason, we would treat it in that manner, but to not have them actually at the table. And then
Any other questions?
Yeah, I want to have a little more discussion on that. So how much of that was for bills that we've been presented with? How much of that $70,000?
we have right now before us a bill that's in my office for roughly $20,000.
That's it?
And that's for the month of January.
Okay.
Roughly half of that is already covered in what you've pre-approved. That was through the $155,000 mark that you had already given us authorization to do. So another 10 plus, I was estimating that we spent about the same amount of time for February and March on negotiations. So I estimated another 20 for each of those months, and then I figured a runoff of another 10.
Okay, are we moving to, we move on these things, right? And then they either go to consent or they don't? I'd make a motion to modify this request then for 70,000 and make it for 20 on the logic that if we've got a bill out there for 20, if this law firm, well, okay, I'll make the motion. You want to open it up for discussion? Then I should start discussing. Go ahead. I'll make the motion to modify this bill to $20,000 from 70, or the authorization to 20 from 70.
Is there support? Support. Open the floor for discussion.
Okay, I would like to have a lot more transparency on the legal bills. I don't think we're at credit risk, so I think that I don't think the law firm's gonna stop doing work for us if we start paying them monthly. Given that we're now meeting systematically as a finance committee, I think we should be reviewing these things as they come due. At a minimum, I'd also like to get process in place that we start looking at these things prospectively rather than retrospectively, and since we now have an in-staff attorney I'd like her to be able to give us some kind of plan for how she anticipates having to use outside legal counsel. So I'm not making this motion with the idea that we're going to stiff Clark Hill by any means for their bills coming forward in the future. I'd just like to review those as they come in so that we can have a better record essentially of how things are going. So my logic for the $20,000 motion is if we've got 10 in the bank to spend for legal that's not authorized yet, we got a bill for 20. If we authorize another 20, there's still 10,000 in there for float and contingencies. And we can leave 10,000 in a float legal fund, and that seems to me to be reasonable. But then otherwise, we can pay as we go, so there can be public discussion of how much work was done and whether we could have saved money. At this point, with this motion as unmodified, would have had us up to 2.25 for legal fees thus far this year, which is real money. So I'd like to see if we can't. I know that we're all on the same page on our desire to sharply reduce our outsourcing of legal services, but I think that this board properly ought to have the oversight of that on a month-to-month basis. So that's the basis for the motion.
Any other questions?
My comment is that, excuse me, I'm assuming that the administration is, or maybe the question is for Julie, do you have a plan in place? Is this typical for what your contract is with Clark Hill? I'm afraid that if we, change to this month-to-month process, that it may be outside of what you guys have already, agreed to with the legal firm. I don't know, especially since it's retro. I think if we were, Dave, I do agree that if we were talking about what's happening in the future, which I think Julie did address, what the plan is for future charges. But I think if we know that we're gonna get a bill for the other months, then why not just kind of be done with it as opposed to waiting each time the bill comes in? I don't know. Because obviously we wouldn't pay more than what the bill is.
Well, my point is exactly that A, they're billing us monthly, so we can pay them monthly, which means we can review it monthly because we're meeting monthly. So if we have a bill, we can pay it. It's not hard to get a line item on the agenda for next month for another $20,000 if that's what we have to do. And if I'm guessing if Julie doesn't have the bill, she doesn't know what the bill's gonna be yet. So, we can guess how much money we're gonna owe them and put it in a pot somewhere, but unless we're all gonna walk under a bus or, the operation's gonna cease to exist, there's no reason we can't do this systematically monthly. That's my logic.
And looking at the $70,000, that's assuming a rate of $250 an hour. It comes out to roughly 280 hours, billable hours. That's over the course of, since it's 60 days, 60 full days, not 60 business days. I mean, that's roughly a full-time employee, 280 hours over the course of 2 months. Why not? Let's hire a second legal person in-house then, for that kind of money.
Julie, can you address my question regarding the process that you typically follow?
Yeah, typically, prior to this year, Clark Hill was at least around that much that we had spent, especially in a year where we had negotiations going on, in particular with the teacher group, which is mainly what Clark Hill sits in on. They typically don't sit in on the other groups. At the beginning of the year, as you know, we had anticipated being able to hire an executive director for HR and legal services, and with that delay, it caused us, excuse me, to rely more heavily on an external law firm. So with the amount of time that we have spent in negotiations with the GREA, we've kind of bounced back, for lack of a better description, on where we've been over the last couple of years. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
So I think it seems like, is the expectation that the billing is gonna happen and payment's gonna happen immediately, or is this, it can happen in a billing cycle, like a month, and you don't have something prearranged with Clark Hill in terms of your typical business practice with them in billing?
No, we try to, with any vendor, it's our goal to turn around payment upon receipt of invoice within 30 days. So, that would think the same would hold true for Clark Hill. So upon receipt of an invoice, we'd want to be able to turn something around within 30 days.
And my intention is this motion would let us do that. I mean, that this would authorize us to pay the current bill, and then we come back with the, when we get the next one, and look at the next one.
I think it seems like we're like over scrutinizing certain bills yet, and I think it is good to just jump in and get this process going. And we already have planned, and we have, Ms. Pitts in place to, take care of a lot of the legal fees. And so it may seem awkward to start it now and scrutinize retroactively, but it may just be the time to start doing this in a more proactive fashion. I think that's.
And my hope is, ideally, now that we have a legal person full-time on staff
Right.
who's good, who we like, that she'll be able to essentially give us a, sort of like an out-of-house budget for the year. Like, I think I'm gonna have to spend $20,000 or $30,000 barring any other events, and we're not gonna tell her to not hire lawyers, but if she can give us a sense of what the budget will be going forward, that lets us plan. So I'd love to see us switch from reactive to proactive on our legal billing, basically, and I think we got the capacity to do that now that we have an in-house lawyer.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to modify the contract from Clark Hill from 70,000 to 20,000. Any other questions, discussion? That motion? All those in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 3-1. Continuing now with the purchasing agenda. Sinking fund, Mr. Gomperz, would you like to give us a brief update on that?
On the one that's, if we could talk about the purchasing item that's, or the sinking fund item that's in the purchasing agenda,
Okay,
I'd like
that's
to,
what I meant to say, the
I'd like
sinking.
to show it on the screen, so you may want to slide over.
Okay.
Just so you can see. I want to give you an idea of what we're doing here. How do we focus that?
Yeah, that's not gonna work.
Man, I thought my eyesight was still okay. There it is.
I won't be able to read it if I don't.
Give you an idea of what we're doing within stocking. There are, and this gets a little hard to read, but there are a number of classrooms that have toilet rooms in them. For example, this one and this one, we're refurbishing those. The main gang restrooms, we are completely redoing to meet current ADA standards. The current kitchen, which was here and really has been gutted to take the parts out for other kitchens around the district. We are building a new kitchen in the stage area, very similar to what we've done at other buildings around the district, so that the gym, cafeteria, and the kitchen are all in one. In this area here, we'll have a community kitchen, like what we've done in other locations, so outside groups have a place to prepare small amounts of food for meetings.
I'm sorry, you said something about the cafeteria, then you see the point to the right.
This,
The cafeteria as it sits.
the kitchen will be in this area. This is the gym cafeteria here,
Oh, okay.
and we
This
have.
existing stage,
Ex-
that's not-
Okay.
This was a stage off the gym, and we're taking that out and creating the kitchen in that
Got
location.
it. So when you say gym cafeteria, you mean where people are sitting to eat their food? I thought you meant where they line up to grab their salads.
No, it is, it is both a gym and a cafeteria. We don't have two different rooms in this, building. We are adding in other classrooms on the first floor, toilet rooms for the early elementary classes, so they'll each have their toilet room directly accessible. And then we've had a couple of, we're adding an elevator here to get to the, up to the second floor. So we will make this building ADA compliant as we open it back up. We are only doing the things that we need to do to open up and get it functioning. There's still a fairly big laundry list of items. We did get favorable bids, so there is a number of alternates included in the cost. One is, it doesn't show here, but under this area is the old coal bunker. The The ceiling deck, which is the pavement above, is failing, and we'll get that closed off, filled, and made safe. And then probably the most important one is currently, this is the media center and this is the office. We're going to include this alternate of flip-flopping those, putting the office here and the media center here. What that does for us with the main door is allows us to have security of anyone entering the building, that we can force them to check into the office before allowing them into the building. So we feel this one has a very big benefit. This is what we're getting for the roughly $2 million. There's still some cosmetic work that will continue on with our team over the years. We have our warm, safe, and dry list to follow up. This will get us open for school in the fall. While we have this up, if I can answer questions, then I'd like to go to at least the floor plans on Ford and Sherwood while we have the screen up.
Why did you not go back to use the other kitchen again, or that kitchen
Well-
space? It looks like storage is sort of, I mean, we're using a lot of storage for some good premium square footage and taking over a gym. That might be good for rainy days.
Taking this over for the gym really didn't help us because of some of the nooks and crannies around here in this area and the exit. There's really nothing left in here, and by having it located in this location, we can have the servery where the students get their food directly in the room they're going to eat in, rather than pick up, or either have to move the food over or pick up and then come into the room. And it's been a successful plan in other locations.
They've previously eaten there.
Yes.
And no other usage for those rooms besides just for the table storage? There couldn't be any other?
No, it allows the tables to be clearly out of the way for gym class.
And this line item, how does that compare to the, you had an anticipated budget of approximately 3 million for stocking, is that correct?
Well, when we worked with the construction manager, we originally set a budget under 2 million. And then as we final plans, we adjusted our warm, safe, and dry funding and had a budget of 2.3, which included 2.1 of warm, safe, and dry funds and $200,000 of food service funds. That budget is all-inclusive, including all our AE and CM fees total. The number before you does not include the AE fees. They were previously approved.
All right. Is there any other questions concerning the approval of the sinking fund dollars?
Yeah, I have a question regarding whether the contractors who are involved in this project, if they qualify for our local first policy?
On the sheet on the warm, safe, and dry breakdown, we noted that the only one that qualified or that came forward through the CM was the mechanical plumbing. They are a local preference policy. It is applied for them, and that affected the selection of that subcontractor.
So that's unfortunate, because when I looked at the list, there are a number of, if I read it correctly, there were a number of vendors within that contract. And so I thought we spent a lot of time last year creating a policy to address some of this. And, and I asked the question, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before that, if we could have a conversation about what our plans are to make sure that we're capturing local first vendors. I kind of want to hear that, because we're going to get down the path, like, this is done now, 2 million done, and you have all of your vendors selected, and only one of them qualify for this local first policy that the board spent a lot of time, in my opinion, a lot of time producing. So I'm just curious, before we start the next 2 million, the next 100,000, the next 1.5, whatever it is, what is the plan? So, and that's not just to you, Ken, I'm just
This
responding to
also
you
doesn't-
because you're the person who, presented.
According to the local policy, the local purchasing policy, on contracts such as this, where it's a construction manager, it's the local preference is not for the contractor in and of itself, it's for the contractor to use
The
subcon.
right.
And they can apply, for a benefit if a certain percentage of the subcontractors.
But there's only one for this project.
However, the policy doesn't require that contractors use local subcontractors if the dollar amount is, we
Right.
go dollar first, and if the benefit is there to provide for the local purchasing, then we can,
I understand the
Right.
policy quite clear, but what I'm saying is we have not proactively implemented our policy.
I'm
And that was my
confused.
concern from before. If we don't pursue people to make sure that we have enough vendors who could potentially qualify, then what was the purpose of creating the policy? That's all I'm saying. I understand the policy, and I understand that we're not in the wrong in terms of the vendor that has been selected. I'm simply saying, we as a district put a policy in place specifically to try and address this before we started spending warm, safe, and dry monies, but we haven't done what we needed to do to recruit enough local first vendors to be able to make sure that we have the right people in place.
I'm confused. Are you saying then are you saying either that we're not using our policy, or that you want to revisit the policy and start adding marketing dollars?
I'm saying we're not using our policy. We have
We're not
not put a
using-
plan in place to.
policy,
Well, no, hang on a second. There's using a policy, and when you say plan in place, are you saying we should start spending marketing dollars to go
No.
out and recruit vendors and say, hey, look, we'd love to have you participate in our plan?
No, what we said is that we would host some type of forum so that local vendors would be aware that we have this new policy and to sign up, under our policy. So it wouldn't necessarily require marketing dollars. It would probably be a matter of an email and a time where vendors could come in so that they could qualify to see if they're local first.
Okay, so so you're now discussing, you're suggesting that we didn't implement the policy as drafted by the board last year because it required, essentially a publication component?
I think we've reached out to both Local First, the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. I think that we worked with the city I think that's not necessarily, and I think if this committee would like to discuss how we can go ahead and develop that, then we can move that to an action item to the end of the meeting, and we can discuss that as to how we would like to continue marketing, if we would like to market for local purchasing.
Yeah, I'd like to do that because that was my request before, and who you just mentioned wasn't shared when I asked the question before, so you know a little bit
Exactly.
more
Yeah,
than
I
what
mean,
the rest of us know,
I
because I
mean-
didn't know that there had been something done to reach out. When I
And
asked you the
I
question
think
before, nothing had been done.
when we were developing the policy, we had discussed the opportunity of maybe having a local purchasing fair type
yeah.
deal. That was through, we've had some transition in administration and other things have come up, and it just
So-
never came to fruition.
Sure, so maybe it's worth having an update on our local first policy and talk about whether we're actually implementing and.
That was my
We could
request
have
for
that
the
be a-
agenda.
I do know that the staff has implemented the policy with fidelity and has done their due
Sure.
diligence in
Well, I
ensuring.
wanna
we're-
know too.
We're not saying they didn't implement, we're saying the word isn't getting out.
Right, it's
Those are
it's
two
not that
different
we're not
Two different
following
things.
the,
problems,
yes,
right.
exactly.
So we're
Yeah,
following
absolutely.
our policy, but maybe at a future meeting, we can have an agenda item where we talk about, rollout and, highlighting and making sure there's enough
Exactly right.
profile on the plan. Because you're right, a policy that nobody knows about is worthless.
Isn't helping anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, especially if you're assuming that people have to self-select, I mean, we're using a market-driven RFP process. If nobody knows you got a component, you can say that, one-armed, veterans get a 15% bid preference, but if they don't know, they don't
All
know.
packets.
Pardon?
It-
No, I understand.
It is in the bid packets, and we actually have a very simple, all you have to do is say, I qualify. They don't have to be
Right.
pre-selected, pre-approved. We verify their address, and that's all we do for
Specifics.
verification.
I understand that, but I think what Ms. Lanier is saying is there's a world of difference between saying it's in all the packets and saying, well, the people who might be eligible might not know to ask for a packet and they might be self-selecting out. I mean, this is the,
If
this is
they're
the
bidding,
devil
they
of.
have a packet.
Oh, I understand, but they might self-select out of bidding. This is exactly the same as the problem with the eliminate the box program. I mean, if all of your employment applications say, tell me whether you've ever been convicted of a felony, people are gonna slink out the door and not fill out your form.
Right.
If you have a self-selecting process, you can say you did it, but if you're not
That's
getting the rollout out. And this is not your issue, this is an issue for the board. So we're clear on that. You guys are doing exactly what you're being asked to do, and you're going with the procedure. This is a question of whether we have to do our job better.
All right, well, let's, any other questions as it relates to the sinking expenditures for Owen Zane's? There's none, is there a motion to approve the purchasing agenda as amended?
Or are you gonna show you want this?
Let's just finish this up. Let's finish this.
Okay, I'm
This will
trying
only
to
take a
figure-
second
okay.
here, and then since he's got it up, we'll do it. But I just want this cleared off the agenda item, and then we can continue on here.
Support.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion
I
carries.
have to trust you guys to look at Sherwood. I'm very concerned about it. I thought we had some very eloquent testimony from teachers. However, I have a job, and I have my job is just sometimes defined by emergencies, and I had a client come in Friday night and tell me that he had to be in court this morning, so I have to go.
Thank you. All right, now we continue.
Just for information, this is the ground floor at GR Ford. The changes that we're proposing here are what are shown in the green are 4 restrooms, so that these rooms can be converted to early L. There'll be pre-K, K, and 1 on this floor. These 2 are shared between the 2 classrooms. And we are also
Can you help me with my bearings? Where's like the mall area?
over,
Gym and all of that?
over here.
Okay,
And then the gym would be to the
okay.
right.
So I'm now there. Okay, thank you.
And to convert these, we wanted to add the classrooms for the early L. In this room, which is currently some kind of a laundry room,
Yeah.
we're doing an alternate to see if we have funding left, we will convert that to a restroom with the thought that with the potential changes in pre-K and need for rooms, we may need another room. But this will be dependent on how the bids come in, whether we can utilize that one also. This we need to do to convert from a middle school to a K-8, pre-K-8. So this is fairly straightforward what we're doing there. Sherwood, let me go through the proposed changes in Sherwood, and then I'll call up Mrs. Long to help me talk about why Sherwood was selected. There are 4 pods. 3 of them are the same, 1 is slightly different. The 3 of them have this area in yellow is a depressed pit. It goes down about 3 steps. So it does limit the space of the continuous floor space. This one does not and has this current wall dividing it. These pod rooms are each about 4,100 square feet. So divided in 4s, they're slightly over 1,000. A typical elementary room is between 700 and 900. Now granted, these include any walkways getting around. Our proposal is in the 3 is to fill in the pit, so it's all one contiguous floor level, and divide them with walls here, and then this one would add 1 wall here to subdivide the space. The walls would go up to the ceiling deck through the suspended ceiling. There would be no doors. The reason for no doors is once we start doing that, we enter a whole different level of code requirements for egress. It also impacts the heating, ventilating, and lighting systems drastically if we were to do that. So what we're providing them is some distinction for each class space. There still would be passage here and here. That's the proposal. Currently, in the pods, 1 pod has 4 classrooms meeting, the other 3 have 3. And they were originally designed floor space-wise for 4, and that was a good piece of the reason that the EI was proposed to go in there.
So, if some of them have 3 pods, and I've been there several times, so I know exactly what it looks like in the pit and all of that, so I really can appreciate leveling that off. And I also understand you're saying that with this new design, the classrooms are actually going to be still slightly larger than the average classroom, which are, what did you say, 900, and these are
7 to
1,000?
900.
7 to 900, and these are 1,000. So, can you kind of help me to see what the pod looks like on this? I see what it will look like with your quad, but what are the 3 section quad, or pods looking like now?
There is no permanent division in here now. Most of the space divisions are done by file cabinets.
Yeah, okay.
They've just been, over time, the staff has used what they could get their hands on to somewhat divide up their space.
So then tell me what the opposition would be to, there's a disconnect someplace, because if I were using file cabinets to divide because of the noise volume or whatever from another classroom, and now I'm going to have a wall to the ceiling, even though I may not have a door, the wall to the ceiling is going to provide me at least a little bit more, noise reduction. So what is the disconnect here? Why isn't this connecting? I don't understand.
That was our design intent and understanding to put the walls in, that it would be a benefit for both sound and visual distraction. There still will be a certain amount of distraction. If someone from this area needs to get to the restroom, they're gonna walk this way, and certainly,
The same as they do now.
but now there's nothing to visually distract at all. So we agree that it would be a benefit. Is it perfect? No. But to enclose these classrooms and make walkways around really shrinks them down significantly. Plus, the cost goes up many times.
So when it's shrunk down, is that still the 1,000, or
Then
that will
you'd be
bring
be-
it down to
you'd be
between
below-
7 and 9?
You'd be well below that.
Okay, so there's the disconnect. That's their concern, is that they're losing even more space.
It would be in between 600 and 700 square feet then,
Okay.
which is very much on the small side for a classroom.
Okay, there's the answer. Okay. And
Now-
you're saying, but shouldn't the, walls outweigh the smaller classrooms? That's kind of
Well,
what you're
actually,
tossing off.
Yes. The wall, we're going to insulate it, to do everything we can to help with the sound. We did take an architect out to the one room that has a single wall and get their opinion on whether we should proceed with this, and they did recommend that this would be a benefit. Now, this does not preclude us from a later date of using these walls if we should decide to fully enclose. These are not throwaway, we could build off them down the road. But the mechanical and electrical changes get significant for when you start fully subdividing spaces.
And those walls will go floor to ceiling.
That would go through the suspended ceiling to the roof deck.
And
So,
this was, I guess the reason for the division, what was the intent of building this building? Like, I know you weren't around when they built this building, but, what was it? Right, right, but what was the original intent of the design of this building? Was that?
I think I can try and speak to that. I was
Yeah.
in the district not too far after Sherwood was built, and open classrooms were in vogue very much at that time.
So it's just an inherent flaw in the building that we're trying to reconcile
It was a
to be able to utilize the space
philosophical view of education in the 70s.
Were the teachers, speaking to some of the concerns that they brought up at the board meeting, were there some teachers on this planning committee in terms of design or changes, or, because that might have helped in terms of buy-in, even though you guys were trying to implement what they were already visually doing? Was that anything that came up, or, I don't know.
In this project, no, we did not include the staff for a couple of reasons. One, when the transformation plan went into effect, the timeframe to implement
Yep.
was very short. Another one is, we don't have a lot of options. It's really this or nothing. So it wasn't like we had several alternates.
It could have helped in terms of some lead teachers in that building understanding exactly what you guys, the conclusions you came to, that there really aren't a lot of options here, and if we want to try and calm noise and et cetera, that at least they could have heard that, because they feel like, yeah, this was just vetted somewhere,
Secretly.
Mr. Clomperens making some plans where, you really were considering student achievement and teacher desire, staff desire in this build.
Could we have Ms. Long speak to the impact? I know there's been some concern expressed about the student population moving into the building and how that addressed and how those concerns will be mitigated.
And where will that classroom be placed, or the
Well,
multiple
we
rooms?
actually have
Yeah.
two options, and because of some of the concerns that were expressed, we're probably looking at option two, right, Ken? If you, would you like to show what our original intent, and then where our revised based on input, and it's still option A, option B, it's not like we're set, but originally,
Originally, we looked at an EI class 1 in each of the pods, so one
Right.
quad. That would also allow the EI, if they needed to do some one-on-one, could share this space and this space. Option 2 is to take one pod and make all 4 quadrants EI.
right.
And it could be any one of them.
And there's pluses and minuses to both
Sure.
options.
Share what those are, please.
The integration with their age-appropriate peers and modeling and so on will be lost by segregating the 4 classrooms in one pod. However, it will also enhance teaming between the EI teachers, so that if, a particular student is having some concerns, there can be quicker communication and addressing of issues and concerns. We still, of course, as students are, per their IEP and per their social, emotional, and academic needs, would then access the gen ed classroom as much as possible for instructional and socialization purposes.
So there was also a question about, excuse me, capacity, and so there was a question about would Sherwood be over capacity when you bring in new students? I think I'd heard that
Yeah.
versus if you place those classrooms in different buildings who had less capacity concerns than they did, at the onset of the transformation plan. So what's the response to that? Excuse me.
The building capacity based on traditional classroom space, as we looked at it, there were 3 of these pods that had a full classroom space. So if you just take that on an elementary level, that's 75 students that could be added to the building.
Okay.
EI brings somewhat less than that.
Right. At this point, we're anticipating 40 students with emotional impairments. Our classroom caseload maximum is no more than 10 at a time. And so we feel that we're well within that, because we're looking at 5 teachers. We're looking at a very strong package, because we do want this to be a very successful program. We're really modeling it around what we've had going on at Harrison Park, where we have been very successful as far as programming for our students with EI. We're really trying to look at a K-8 location for that sense of permanence and relationship and trust and confidence, both from the student and family perspective to ownership by the school community. So
So they would be coming from district-wide?
we will have 2 locations for classrooms for students that require a categorical room for EI. One would be at Harrison Park, and then the other one would be at Sherwood Park. So we would be located in 2 sides of the city, K-8.
Okay, so then, since we're talking 2 sides of the city, why wouldn't a place like Dickinson had been selected, since they were way under capacity in terms of the amount of people
I'll
in
let
the
our
building?
facility
Yeah.
guru address that.
When we looked at Dickinson to convert to a pre-K-8 and have 2 sections per grade level, it took every classroom. So while we have a ASD room
Yes,
in Dickinson,
2.
we did not have spare rooms to add in. Dickinson, GR Ford, when we converted those over, took every classroom available for the traditional school.
And there are no others on the south side of town that could have been used. I'm just thinking about how
Right.
many, because I do have the same concern. If Sherwood was already kind of high at the capacity level, and then we're, advertising how good all of these schools will be now because we're making whatever modifications, that it may attract more, people within and the boundaries were actually expanded. It's gonna attract more people to that building, and so even before you place the EI students in there, the 75 seats that you had open could potentially be filled by people coming back to their neighborhoods, since we're trying to coach people into that. So and then I'd hate for us to get to that place when enrollment happens, and then what? I don't know what the answer is, I just want it to be
This allows for two
highlighted.
sections, right?
Yes. This still allows for 2 sections per grade, plus the EI classrooms.
And so when you say that the EI classrooms, then the kids will be mainstreamed, the students will be mainstreamed when possible, so the design is that they're in the categorical classrooms when required 10 per classroom, and then they'll be also in other rooms as well.
Correct.
Okay.
They can have we can have 15 students on a teacher's caseload, but service no more than 10 at one time.
10 at one time. So kids will be rotating into other classrooms.
That's the intent.
And support will go with students, or, okay.
Depending on the needs. And, yeah, and exactly, how, at first, it might be that a parapro might support and then fade, because we always want to fade and make that student be an independent learner.
And if I can just add this too, I'm not exactly sure who made the comment or made reference to scores at Sherwood decreasing because of the addition of EI students, but there were parents who found that offensive. So I just think we need to, I want to say that publicly, that my comments or questions in no way are in support of not having EI students there because of test scores or any of that. It's all about making sure that we have the capacity to make sure that all students have, an educational environment that's conducive to learning in an optimal environment. So the test scores piece, I think that's about us making sure we're doing our jobs to make sure that kids are educated. But the capacity issue is something I still don't feel like I have my head wrapped around, because there are so many schools on the south side. You have this one right here, here, wherever it is over there, too, that's, that was, lower than Sherwood when we were talking about capacity.
K-5, though.
And I think that's a K-5 now, but, so
Yeah.
it just seems like, maybe you guys have, I'm not saying that you don't usually, but, you've done your homework and it is what it is, but I just wanted to make sure that I was asking those questions, because I can see
It's important for you to
where
ask.
it was pretty full already, and it seemed like an odd place to put more students when you're already expanding boundaries.
Your teacher, I'm assuming?
Parent.
Okay, we had a public comment time at the beginning of the meeting.
I'd be happy to address any questions
Yeah,
you
we'll-
might have later.
Okay, yeah, well, the blueprint wasn't up during public comment, so that's why.
Okay, we'll certainly can come back as soon as the meeting's over, we'll come talk. Is there any other questions concerning it? When will we be bringing requests for approval for this forward, or?
Our anticipation is for Ford and Sherwood, we would bring bid amounts at the April Finance Committee next month.
I have two more questions about Sherwood. Any chance to put, in terms of visual distraction, sort of a curtain that could be moved back and forth for some of these walkways that teachers may be able to utilize? I don't know how the lighting is or anything of that nature, but.
I would say that by going with the option B, whereby the classrooms are in one pod, certainly the placement of the EI classrooms will not at all add or detract from the current traffic
Yeah.
that they have.
It's gonna get better.
Okay.
'Cause it's
No, I was adding.
Yeah, But I don't know, if Ken
in
can address more,
general.
as far as like some kind of a.
Minimizing visual distraction
Even
even
more.
in a gen ed
Yeah.
class, right.
It has been my experience in my few years in education that students tend to be more self-regulatory in regards to auditory and visual distractions than adults. It's interesting how they can tune us out when we're right next to them, or tune us in. And so I would just offer that sometimes it's more the adults, and that's not to say that that's not important, but that kids are a lot more flexible, and they conform to the educational setting a lot more than adults tend to.
Well, I-
The visual piece, I think, because of the walls, they could probably face inward. Obviously,
Right,
the noise
yeah.
level,
Yeah.
would.
Oh, a
still be
little
there.
friend walking to go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
psst, you know,
Yeah.
that sort
Sure.
of thing,
Yeah.
it may just, if it's
I
a
think, again,
problem,
that's a
but-
teaching
Yeah,
piece for all staff as far as the protocol of how you conduct yourself as you're going to the bathroom or to the gym or such.
And I'd say, I mean, in that building, because they are so open, those kids are self-regulating. I mean, you don't have
Yeah.
any problems walking through there and seeing them looking in any of that. Yeah, and you can see like all over the.
Now, I've been in situations where we've had clinical students and so on visit classrooms on a regular basis, and it's amazing how the kids don't even notice you. But,
yeah, I grew up in an elementary like that. I mean, it was fine. I was just the teachers, again, trying to address and
yeah,
that
and we
they
want
had
to-
brought up and felt that it was somewhat chaotic.
and we are
so-
ready to continue to address and work with staff and their concerns.
Right. What about parents? Have you reached out to parents?
Not at this time.
I think that'll be another good idea,
okay.
because I think, when you're hearing on the news or in meetings
You
and things
bet.
of that nature, even from staff, what they believe is going on, to be able to share kind of this full package with the floor plan and all of that for parents, I think it'll help them
Very good.
to understand what's transpiring.
Yep, we'll work with building administration with that too.
All right, any other updates on Warm,
I
Safe,
do
and
have
Dry?
one more question, sorry.
Go ahead.
In regard to this, and you were talking about fading out in terms of support. And this is EI more than learning disabilities. Nevertheless, what is your rate of being able to fade out a student in terms of support? I mean, if you're in seventh grade and you're still needing a lot of emotional support, it seems to me that there's not going to be a high rate of fade out. I mean, how much are you budgeting in terms of?
Actually, this is where, again, we've
Yeah.
been very successful at Harrison Park. That by the time they get, if a student has had support, through, elementary, by the time we get to the middle school grades, those students, again, they're comfortable in that particular setting. They're comfortable with the staff that support them. They often can be, the whole point system, level system, et cetera, can be faded, and they can be successful. Not all the time, mind you. And what gets to be a challenge, particularly with students that have emotional impairments, where typically they are of average intelligence or higher. If we don't achieve that, then they're really handicapped when they get to high school. Because then we get into highly qualified instructors, we get to the Michigan Merit Curriculum, we get to all of those things that if they have not, if they're not able to participate in Gen Ed, we have a really difficult and challenging time providing the appropriate instruction at high school to make them be high school diploma students. So it's really incumbent upon us to really work with kids, if you will, K-6, so that 7 and 8, they
Become more independent.
they become more independent learners, right? So, I can't give you a rate, but that is the goal, that would be the goal, that, if the handicapping condition is identified early enough, and we provide services intensively early enough, that we can assist those students, again, in being part of the Gen Ed environment.
Anything else, Ken? Nope, all right, thank you. Budget calendar, I know there's still an error in the budget calendar from,
I have fixed that moving forward
it's not that big.
and saved it this time.
Anything you'd like to update us on there?
Just that we're a tad behind and where we thought we would be at this point in time for developing the budget. We're trying to be as accurate as we can be with our student projections and with the movement with the transformation plan. So that piece is taking a little bit longer for us. So it's then has a domino effect, so we are a little bit behind in the schedule.
Anything else you have for us?
I do not have anything else for you today.
All right, policy, we don't have anything, guess we can drop in the local purchasing discussion here. How we would like to proceed forward with some marketing to get knowledge to the public. I don't know if that's something maybe even you and I and Mr. Hemholt and Ms. Davis could sit down and have a brief discussion about how we could draft some communication to get out there, just a reminder, an update communication with some of our partners.
Works for me.
All right. John, anything you want to update on legislative, budget-related stuff? Nothing that we haven't talked about, all right? Yeah. If you don't mind just giving us 2 minutes real quick. I know I didn't put you on the agenda, but I know this is your, this is how you roll, so. He does fine at it, I'm confident.
I think probably the most notable is that you've seen the House moving their budgets. They've moved almost all but two. And no huge surprises, pretty similar to what we've briefed you on before. The other big issue was the Education Achievement Authority, which did move out of the House, and they did get amendments on there, one of which is an amendment that we worked on that helps to provide some degree of criteria by which they look at bringing those schools that are on the 5% list, so it's not just an automatic. And then the ISDs were successful in also getting an amendment that basically created another kind of middle person, if you will, where the ISD could play more of a role in working with the local district as opposed to the EAA taking over the district. Yeah. So, I mean, it certainly has its issues and challenges, and there are lots of parts of it that we're not very favorable toward, but it's significantly better than when it was introduced in lame duck.
Now what?
Now it goes to the Senate, and the question there will be really how much the Senate does with it. You know, we're starting to see some signs from the Senate that they're not as eager to do some heavy controversial issues. They are getting into election mode to some degree. Although if they're going to do it, they're going to do it in the spring now and get it done with. This is a priority for the governor, and there's transportation funding as his other priority. There's a handful of others. So our guess is that this probably will move in some way, shape, or form just because it is a priority. But it's kind of questionable what the Senate may do with it at this point. So we're going to continue to monitor it. I know we have a little legislative get-together coming up here before too long, so stay tuned.
Thank you, John. Any questions? All right. Anybody have anything else they'd like to bring to the table here? All right. Guess we can, meeting will be adjourned.